Hello, everyone. It is 6:30, and I call the Joint Commission meeting for Lawrence-Mitty Park to order tonight. And this Joint Commission meeting, including Cupertino Parks and Rec Commission, Planning Commission, Bike and Ped Commission. So let's start the roll call of Parks and Rec Commission.
All right, Commissioner Stanek?
Here.
Commissioner Kumarapan?
Here.
And Chair Shu?
Here.
And for right now, Commissioner Swamy and Vice Chair Bigor are absent.
Okay, so next is the Planning Commission.
Good evening, everyone. Commissioner Kapil?
Yeah, present.
Commissioner Saxena?
Present.
Commissioner Wong?
Present.
Vice Chair Maripapa? And Chair Scharf.
Here.
Good. So let's start the roll call of Bike and Ped Commission.
Chair Ganga?
Aye.
Vice Chair Carter?
Here.
Commissioner Eschelbeck?
Here.
Commissioner Linskog? Commissioner John? We have a quorum with Commissioners Linskog and John absent.
Okay, sounds good. Since we don't have any previous meeting minutes to approve,
Looks like Chair Shu's.
let's just start the Lawrence.
Sorry, I think you froze up. I don't know if that was only for me. Sorry, Chair Shu.
Okay.
We'll also ask for any oral communication prior to this item.
Oh, so before that, we need to ask the non-agenda communication. Okay, so our next step is for the community members. If you have any public comments on it, please raise your hand. Okay, I see one resident, Connie Cunningham. Okay, you can talk, and you have 3 minutes to give comment.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Connie Cunningham. I am a resident of Cupertino for the past 34 years. I wanted to speak to, it's related. On June the 7th, there were 2 ceremonial matters, one for a proclamation recognizing June as Immigrant Heritage Month to celebrate the history and achievements of immigrant communities across our nation. Secondly, there was a proclamation recognizing June as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and Intersex Pride Month to honor the achievements of that community and to celebrate diversity. On that theme, what I wanted to urge the Planning Commission to do during the course of the continued discussions on the housing element, is to consider strongly changing zoning in advance of the or during the housing element discussion, so that we can encourage people of all nationalities and all income levels, all ability levels to be able to build and live in our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Connie, for sharing those information, and there's so many news. I see more community members got online. If you have any public comments on a non-agenda item, please raise your hand. Now it's a public comment session. Helena Davis. Yeah, we have 3 minutes to talk.
Oh, okay. Hi there, everyone. I'm Helene Davis, and I'm a private citizen, but I'm also speaking as a former Parks and Rec Commissioner And I was on the commission during the negotiations with the roads and the airport department. And I've had an opportunity to tour the site. And I think there's just incredible potential there. And I'm sure with input from our community that the city will determine what the best use is for the property. My personal choice would be some kind of nature preserve. The creek there is just really special. It's still pretty wild. And I did fill out the survey, so there you go.
Helene,
Oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We haven't gotten to the item. This was for oral communication for items not on the
I'm
agenda.
so sorry.
That's
I
okay.
came late. I
No
came
problem.
late. So, but you will have time for that, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Sorry, I'm leaving.
Yeah. So you can raise your hand later after, after the staff report. Thank you. And Lisa Warren. Yeah, you have 3 minutes to talk.
I mean, far less than 3 minutes. At this point, I just want to say I'm really happy that this joint meeting is happening. I think we don't have enough of these, whether it's this combination or others. So thank you for making it happen.
Yeah, and thank you for joining this meeting and provide community inputs. So now we don't have anyone else raised hand. Okay, so let's get to agenda number 1. Many residents supported a new park on east side Cupertino, and Lawrence-Mitty Park was actually discussed for more than 10 years. And now we are glad to see our city started the study and design work of the park. So let our director to introduce more details of the current status.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your attendance, especially in light of the finals game that was scheduled at the same time as our meeting this evening. Just wanted to go over, I wanted to read the subject and recommended action for all of you. It's to consider an update to the Joint Commission on the status of the environmental summary report, public outreach process, and next steps for the Lawrence-Mitty Master Plan Project. And the recommended action is to receive an update on the status of the environmental summary report, public outreach process, and provide input on next steps for the Lawrence-Mitty Master Plan Project. A couple of items. Wanted to just get everybody on the same page. The reason we're doing this joint commission meeting instead of bringing these items to you at your individual commission meetings is really just to expedite the process and to have everybody in the same room to hear the feedback that we're getting from all the different commissioners regarding all the things involved on this project. So we're happy that we could get a quorum from each of these commissions to be able to conduct this meeting this evening. So thank you. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is after we have the presentation and we do go to questions, we would really appreciate everyone to use their raise your hand feature. Since there are so many different commissioners, it will be quite helpful for us to be able to call on people and facilitate the meeting in a timely fashion. So we appreciate your cooperation. And now I will turn it over to Lisa and our CIP team that is handling the presentation for this evening. Thank you.
You want to share screen there, Jan? Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the work completed to date for the development of a park at the Lawrence-Mitty site. My name is Lisa Camelli and I work in the capital improvement program, and I'm the project manager for the development of the park. We're looking forward to an opportunity to build a park that reflects the community's needs and is aligned with the goals of the 2020 Park System Master Plan. We're excited to be here to present the work completed on the project and to get your feedback regarding the next steps. I'd like to introduce the key members of our project team. First, with the city, we have with us tonight Susan Michael is the Capital Improvement Program Manager. Joanne McGreeny, who was just speaking, is the Director of Parks and Recreation. And Matt Morley is the Director of Public Works. Additionally, in December 2021, the city hired MIG to assist with the assessment and development of the park. Joining us tonight are a few members of their team to provide an overview of the work completed and to discuss key findings. With MIG, we have Jan Iceland, who is MIG's primary project manager. Also, we have Myrna Ortiz, MIG's public outreach specialist. Also, Steve Lang, who is a principal at MIG, and Mike Campbell, who is the lead for the environmental studies completed on the site. Next slide. I'd like to give you a short summary of what we'll be discussing this evening. First, we'll provide you with a project overview to give you some context regarding the existing site conditions and where we are in the park development process. Then we'll discuss the work completed to date for the site-specific technical investigations and for public outreach. Also, we'll provide you with a summary of the findings for the environmental analysis as well as the community outreach process. Then we'll discuss what's on the horizon regarding next steps for the project. And finally, you will have the opportunity to ask any clarifying questions and provide us with your ideas on how best to proceed with project development. Next slide. This slide is intended to give you some idea of the current process we've planned for the design and development of the park. With MIG, we developed an approach to achieve conceptual design of the park, and I'd like to walk you through the process a little bit. We've divided the project into 5 phases. These phases do not incorporate the final design or construction of the park. But as mentioned in the staff report, City Council has expressed the wish to extend our contract with MIG to include full design development and assistance through construction. The city's in conversation with MIG about expanding the current scope of work. But regardless, final design and construction will begin after the master plan has been adopted. Phase 1 is the technical site assessment. This includes analysis of the environmental and regulatory constraints on the site. This body of work helps us assess what permits are required for development of the site, what physical constraints are present on the site, and what plant life, birds, bugs, and critters we need to consider as we design and construct the site. Multiple field studies are involved in this work. The site investigations were completed between January and April of 22. MIG has compiled the data into a single draft environmental summary report. And once a final version of the report is completed, it'll be published on the city's Engage Cupertino website. Phase 2 includes development of a community vision. This phase encompasses the community outreach the city is doing to solicit ideas and concerns about the design and use of the site. The public's input is critical to the success of the project. Later, Myrna will be discussing steps taken during this process. Taking all the input received from various forums, we've put together a draft community outreach summary report. This report will be published on the Engage Cupertino website once it's finalized. The visioning process also includes this meeting to obtain your feedback, as well as a presentation to City Council planned for late July. Phase 3 includes the creation of design alternatives. From what we've learned in phases 1 and 2, the city has analyzed and summarized key findings to allow us to move into phase 3. MIG will develop 3 alternative conceptual designs for the layout and use of the park. These designs will be conceptual and will not include a lot of detail, but will give information regarding proposed landscape areas, recreational features, park amenities such as benches, restroom, drinking fountains, as well as potential uses for the park. These 3 alternatives will be presented to the public for input and selection of a preferred design alternative. The community will have the opportunity to continue to provide input and stay informed through additional planned community meetings and pop-up events, also by providing feedback at commission and council meetings, as well as via the Engage Cupertino website. The outcome of this phase will be the selection of a preferred conceptual design for the park. Phase 4 is developing the master plan. Once a preferred conceptual design is selected, MIG will further develop the design plan and incorporate it into the wider master plan. The master plan will include the conceptual design plan, the data and results of public outreach process, and the environmental site analysis report. The draft master plan will be presented to the public as well as this commission and city council for final comments. Once final comments are incorporated, the master plan will be presented to city council for adoption. Phase 5 includes reviewing the environmental impact. In accordance with CEQA and city code, the city and MIG will prepare the initial study and required documentation and submit it to the appropriate regulatory agencies for review and approval. We anticipate this process being about 6 months after our preferred concept design is approved. Once these 5 phases are complete, the city can begin final design development and plan for future construction. Next slide. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the site, but we wanted to provide you with some context about the location. As you can see from the map, the Lawrence-Mitty site is located along the far eastern boundary of Cupertino and is adjacent to Sterling Barnhart Park. The site was identified in the 2020 Park System Master Plan as a property to purchase and annex to help improve park access to the East Cupertino community. The site was purchased in 2020, and in April 2022, the property was approved for annexation by Santa Clara County LAFCO from the city of San Jose. That annexation is still in the administrative process. The property is 7 acres in size and includes Saratoga Creek. Historically, the site contained orchards, but since the 1970s, it was used by Santa Clara County as a stockpile site for road construction debris. The city is excited about the opportunity to convert this property into a great park and trail amenity for the residents of Cupertino. Next slide. And with that, I want to thank you, and I'd like to turn it over to Jan to provide a little more detail about the specifics of the project. Jan?
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here today. So I just want to walk through the site a little bit. Not everyone on the call, I'm sure, has been there, especially to the newer part that's fenced off. So here's the slide Lisa showed with north up. Now we've turned sideways just to fit it on the screen. And you can see north is to the right, and that's where Highway 280 is, and south is to the left. So I'll walk you through the site from the left to the right in the next slide. So here we have on the south part of the slide of the site, our site actually includes the existing part of the Saratoga Creek Trail. The lower portion has a sound wall along it for a little while, as you can see on the graphic. And then as you continue north, the sound wall ends and the creek trail continues. There are a few sites, like you can see in the middle slide, that are a little bit wider where some small amenities could happen. And then on the very right picture, you can see almost the end of the existing trail. This pedestrian bridge that you see comes over from Sterling Barnhart Park and offers access from that side. And then just beyond it is the Mitty Way crossing, which you'll see in this one on the lower left picture. This is an existing crossing of the Lawrence Expressway with a lighted pedestrian crossing. And then just to the north of this crosswalk is where the site is currently fenced off. And this is the area that was the former staging construction site. And so this is the area you see in the middle and right photo, which looks like gravel, but is really more like asphalt under there. And this is the big open space that has the most potential for our recreation space. And then to the north of this, we have the north end of our site, which starts to be very constrained. You can see on the left picture, there's a very steep gabion wall. So we'll need to think about protection measures for that. We do have some instances like that on the South Trail that have the split rail fence in that situation. And then the middle picture, you can see the existing sort of partial trail. It gets really close to the creek. That gets very narrow. And then there's actually a little bit of sound wall there at the end, which you can see in the map graphic. And then it gets extremely narrow where the creek gets channelized here in the very lower right picture. And this gets to be a pretty constrained condition where it's difficult to continue the trail without some alterations along the expressway there, kind of where you see the pole and the street light right around here. So that's the site that we're working with. And, you know, it has some constraints. We all know that there are things to take into consideration when we're developing this site, and that's why we developed this environmental summary, which was attached to your staff report. And we studied all of these factors. We assessed the citywide goals and regulations. We did a topographic survey, assessed the circulation and access issues, noise, took into consideration the existing utilities, easements, and setbacks. Cornerstone Earth Group did a soil assessment of the site. We looked at stormwater and hydrology, biological resources, and then the existing trees and planting, and future thoughts on that as well. So looking at all of those factors over the last few months, we came up with these opportunities and constraints diagrams. So starting with the constraints, we looked at access and recreation, and we do have a very narrow constrained site because we have the creek on the west side and Lawrence Expressway on the east side of the site. So we do have a issue with creating new parking. So, you know, the parking we have now is kind of what we're going to get for this site. So it makes sense for us to really play up the bike and pedestrian connections and really assess what kind of recreation we put in here. We know we're not going to put in a huge soccer field, you know, like a sports complex or something like that. It's going to need to be something that is lends itself to bikes and pedestrians. Another constraint, which also is an opportunity, as the community member mentioned, is the creek. So we know this has a lot of opportunity to be a focal point for the community, but we also have to take into consideration the existing constraints. There are reasons for us to stay out of the creek bank and just work from the top of bank inwards to our site. There's a lot of restrictions on that other areas. So that's what we were thinking for kind of our edge of work. We can still create overlooks and adjacencies to the creek, but not going down into it. We also want to be careful about what kind of tree removals we do. We do want to have some spots where we might remove invasive species or have, you know, remove a tree for a great overlook, but we don't want to take away from the experience of the mature canopies that do exist. And we do have what's the word? We'll have to replace trees that we remove at a certain rate. So we want to be very judicious with the ones that we would remove. Another consideration that is also related to the creek are the utilities. So the City of Cupertino is on the upper part of this slide, the west side, but that's across the creek, and it's hard to connect to utilities across the creek. We don't want to make pipes and things that go across. So we're going to need to coordinate with the City of San Jose to work with their utilities on the east side of the site. That just makes more sense from an efficiency standpoint. Another current constraint is the surfacing in the whole area of that big open site. Right now, it's impervious. It's this leftover asphalt surface. So right now, that's really negatively impacting the creek. You know, water runs off. It's not treated well by going through soil first. So that's a constraint that we can definitely improve upon with our work. And another one is that I already mentioned was the steep creek edges. So we'll need to take safety into consideration for that. And then the next group of items is the noise. I'm sure everyone has driven the Lawrence Expressway and knows that it's a very fast, well-traveled street. A lot of people are going, 55 on there. And so there's significant noise coming from that, and also from some additional noise coming from 280. And there are a couple points that we need to keep where there's access for maintenance and emergency vehicles. It's a little hard to see on this map, but there's one right about here, and then there's one down here that we'll want to keep and probably reconfigure to make sure that it meets current standards. So in addition to the noise, a lot of community members also expressed that there's a safety factor along there too, that they don't really feel safe just the way the cars are whizzing by. The next group of constraints is soil, and we have a few different conditions. We have some piles of soil that are left over on the site from the construction staging days, and those have been assessed. You can kind of see the contour lines here and here, and those have been assessed, and they do have some debris like concrete items and things in there that would need to be removed, but otherwise those are fine for reuse on the site. So we do have a little extra soil to work with if we wanted to, say, make a berm or push that around the site to make a feature. The other soil that was tested is along the freeway here, and you can see this orange line with the little lines all parallel. So right along the expressway, Cornerstone Earth Group did assess that soil, and there are higher than typical lead concentrations there. There's not a requirement to remove the soil, but we do have numbers of what those are, and that's something for the city and others to consider. We can keep it there if we want to. If people feel strongly, there could be other mitigation measures that could be taken for that soil. And then actually the third area of soil is along the creek edge itself. During the construction staging time, a lot of soil was pushed up against the top of bank. And this is the same soil that was in those piles within the middle of the site, like here. So there's nothing particularly wrong with the soil. We don't have to remove it, but it is creating kind of a visibility barrier to the creek. We'd like to remove as much as possible so that we can have a better view into the creek and really have that feeling of nature connection for the public that come to this site. We do have to be a little bit careful about where exactly, specifically in each condition where we remove those, because we don't want to negatively impact the mature tree roots of some of those more significant native trees. So those are the constraints. Took a little while, but we also have a lot of opportunities. And you can see in purple, these are the big recreation spaces that we have to work with to provide some great new opportunities for the people on the east side of Cupertino. And this is really the main space here on the right side. This other purple area feels like there's a lot of mature trees in there. So these are kind of pockets of space within those mature trees where we could do additional benches, different smaller passive recreation type amenities. We also have some great connections to existing recreation because Sterling Barnhart is right here. So there are some natural connections we could make in terms of extending play and extending community recreation from there to here and really creating sort of a whole corridor of recreation and play. We also have to the south, past off of this page, we have Rancho Rinconada Pool. So that kind of extends the corridor even more. And then there's quite a few schools that are within the area in Cupertino to the west of the site. There's the middle school, high school, and elementary that are this direction. They're all, I think, within a mile, as I recall. So that's a lot of, and this is a pretty bikeable route right here, the orange line. And then on the other side of the expressway, across this lighted intersection, there's Mitty High School to Archbishop Mitty High School. So that there's a lot of, and a neighborhood. So there's a lot of people that could come from that direction as well. And then I kind of went through the creek already. I think everything I said that was in the previous slide, there's a lot about the creek that are negatives that can really be turned into positives with this project. Those of us that have been there know that it's a great amenity, but a lot of people haven't been there. And there's a lot of opportunity to open it up visibility wise and have more nature education, possibly collaborate with schools and have environmental education opportunities. And next on the list is noise. We have an opportunity where we can do things to mitigate the noise. We're not gonna completely get rid of the noise because the expressway levels are at a level that they can be reduced, not completely eliminated, but there are things we can do with a sound wall or a berm or both, combination of both, to lower those noise levels. And then in terms of the soil, like I said, we can take away the soil piles that are there, kind of obstructing the views, and use those on the site. We can also reduce the impervious surface that's there, and that'll really improve the creek health if we do that. So I think that that'll be a big selling point to the environmental review bodies, that anything we're doing here really is improving that by making more pervious surface, which helps water seep through and treats it as it goes towards the creek. So that was a little lengthy, but now you're a little bit more familiar with all the opportunities and constraints. And a little later, when we get to the discussion section, we have this slide of, these are kind of the main topics that are in consideration that we'd love to get your input on tonight. The sound, the soils, the connection to the north, which I didn't go into great detail, but we have some other graphics on that later we can share. We really know that the community wants to connect to the north and to Stevens Creek Boulevard, but we know that there's some difficulty there. So we'd love to hear from the Bike and Ped Commission about direction to head in that department. And then the fourth bullet point here is site access, just talking about maintenance, emergency vehicles, and general accessibility. So we'll get to this later, but that's just kind of a preview of those considerations we'd like to discuss. And now I'm going to pass it over to Myrna to talk about community outreach.
Great. Thank you, Jan, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be giving you a summary of the engagement that we did during this phase of the project. We had multiple opportunities for Cupertino residents to engage with us in person and online and to provide their input on the park and trail. So in the next couple of slides, we'll share about the events that we hosted and give you a summary of the survey that we did online, where residents were also asked to give their input, and Jan shared a few key points as she was going over the site itself. So we'll get into some more details with that. The first events that we hosted were 2 pop-up events. These were in combination with other events that were already happening within the city, including the Bunny Run during Easter weekend around City Hall. We engaged with residents and asked them for their input on this master plan, what they'd like to see at the site. The second event as a pop-up was during a Saturday soccer event at Creekside Park. And with these 2 events combined, we talked to about 60 Cupertino residents. We shared information about the project, our timeline with the process, and really asked them for their thoughts and ideas, what they'd like to see in this area. Some of the key themes you see on the slide, based on the input that we heard from them, are areas for climbing and play, including basketball or sports courts. A lot of people mentioned nature trails, shaded trees, native plants, really having a space to connect with nature and the environment. They also want to see picnic areas or flexible lawn space, and ideas that came up were a small performing space for people to just enjoy and gather. We also heard comments around having space for a dog park, and that was mentioned a few times throughout the engagements. Next slide. In April, we hosted a virtual community meeting. This was over Zoom, and we had about 15 attendees. During the Zoom meeting, we shared again details about the site, the opportunities and constraints, a lot of what you have just heard today. And we engaged residents using multiple polling questions throughout the meeting, just to get a sense of what their ideas were, what their concerns were. And then we also hosted a Q&A session. And during that discussion with the community, some of the themes that came up during the meeting were residents wanting more connections to the Stevens Creek Boulevard area, safety and visibility. So for example, adding lights to the trail at night. That came up both in the virtual meeting as well as in our in-person events. People were interested in maintaining the creek healthy with habitat restoration and wildlife protection. So they really want to maintain the creek and be able to protect it from more people coming in to use the space. Access to the park and the trail, both from the south and northern ends, were another point of discussion, and also from the local neighborhood. People were interested to know if there was going to be parking or how other residents would be able to access the site itself. And some residents had concerns around the encampments and providing housing options to the unhoused residents that are currently on the site. So that was another piece that came up in concerns. Next slide. One of our larger events that we hosted during this engagement phase was a community site tour of the actual site. We invited guests and residents to visit the site and engage with our staff members, both from MIG, our team, as well as from city staff, to just learn more about the site and really experience it firsthand. Many of the people that joined us, we had about 60 residents come by during the 2 hours that we were there on a Saturday morning. Many of them were familiar with the trail itself and use it on a regular basis, but had not been inside the park area since that is fenced off, and we're eager to get in there and get a sense of what the space would be, how large the site itself is. So some of the key themes that you see on here were, again, having access to the creek or having an overlook from the park area itself. People were interested in connecting with the creek. Having an area for dogs, that again was comments that came up multiple times, and a lot of the residents that we engaged with during that day were walking their dogs on the trail itself. The sound wall was another point of discussion, and at each of the site stations that we had throughout the site that day, we asked people about how they felt about the sound wall, both on comfort level when you're experiencing the noise coming off the expressway. And some of the additional comments related to the sound wall were that people wanted the sound wall there for safety from the vehicles coming along the expressway, as well as for comfort around just feeling separation from the speeding cars, having some sort of protection when you're in the trail or in the park itself. People mentioned having trees, again, nature trails, having environmental education was important for residents. They like to see picnic tables, benches, and areas for play of all ages, or space for sports courts. So really giving options for residents to enjoy the park, both in a calm, leisure way or in active, playful activities. And so we also hosted an online survey. This was online and open for residents to respond to for about 6 to 7 weeks in the last couple of months. And we were able to reach 563 residents or respondents. Some of them were residents of the western side of San Jose as well. So about 50% of those that responded to the online survey said that they lived within a half mile of the trail. So they're users, they know about it, they feel they're part of that neighborhood. 84% were Cupertino residents, with another 12% of them being from the western San Jose neighborhood areas. And 30% of the residents that responded were actually from the Rancho Rinconada neighborhood, with another 16 or so percent from the Monta Vista neighborhood as well. Next slide. So we gathered community input not only through multiple choice questions, which you have access to in the engagement summary report that was provided to you, but we also asked residents to give us their input in open-ended questions. And so in those responses, some of the summary key points that came out was that the community would like to see the new park emphasizing bike trails, walking trails, nature, and play. The amenities should be family friendly and connect people to nature. There was input on dog access from both sides. There were about 11% of the open-ended comments that supported or were in favor of having dog access in this park, with about 2% of the comments saying that they did not want to have dog access in the park. So we documented that through the report, and you have access to the raw data as well. Next slide. We asked residents to select their top recreation features and their top features around wildlife, nature, and education. And so that's what you're seeing on this slide. Again, nature play came on top. Things to climb. People want to have things to climb in the space. Again, for all ages, not only for young children. Fitness equipment is another option, like Jen mentioned. It could be activities throughout the trail and throughout the park space. And then around wildlife, nature, and education, nature trails, again, native plants to enhance the wildlife, and an overlook of the creek. So again, these themes are recurring, and they kept coming up throughout our survey, as well as the in-person engagement. Next slide. And so when we asked the residents and community around their top community and comfort features, the things that came on top were having shaded areas throughout the trail and the park site itself, walking paths, restrooms, and seating. And so these are just things we want you to keep in mind during our discussion as well. We'll come back and hear your thoughts on some of these top priorities for the community. We wanted to find out more of who was responding to the survey and how they were using the current trail and how familiar they were with the existing space that's available. About 70% of the respondents said that they use the trail for walking. Another 35% say they bike on the trail. About 20% bike with their kids or bring out their kids with their bikes. And about 17% use the trail for dog walking. From the respondents, about a third of the participants said that they use the trail a few times a year, and 12% said that they use it most days, with the remaining responses being evenly split between once a week, once a month, or never. So there's a wide range of users on the trail. And we also asked them what would make them use the trail more, or features that they'd like to add to the trail. And you're seeing those on the slide. So having a destination that the trail ends at the park side, or having a park experience, attractive nature area, quiet or having buffer from the road was important, and shade as well. And then again, some new things that people would like to see is having a creek overlook, separated nature or soft trails, and having restroom amenities on site. So here's a summary, just some key considerations for you to keep in mind as we go into our conversation today, and as you have time for questions and discussion. We want to make sure that we just highlight some of the key pieces for the community, and you've heard these throughout our presentation, keeping in mind that they'd want to see more wildlife, nature, educational opportunities, maybe in connection with the local schools, extension of the bike trail, along with separated walking trails or soft trails. Nature play was important, connecting to nature, having native plants, habitat restoration or enhancement, reduction of the on-site noise level at every point, not only along the trail, but even within the larger space of the park. Keeping in mind safety for users throughout the park and trail and at different times of the day. And then the amenities for comfort, so benches, picnic tables, and restrooms. The topic around dogs, and do they have access to the park or not? That's something that we'd want to hear your feedback on as well. And completing the bike trail to the north end. As Jan mentioned, that's something that might be in future plans outside of our project scope. That is something that the community had questions about, and we're eager to know what the plans would be for that.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Myrna. So now we just want to briefly let you know what's coming down the road, what our next steps are after this. As Lisa mentioned, we have these project phases, and right now we're kind of in between 2 and 3. So we're getting close to creating the design alternatives. But before we do that, you all that are here tonight, the Joint Commission, and then in about a month or so, the City Council, we want to make sure that your input is also factored in. So we're sharing the community input and site analysis with you tonight. We want to hear more from you. And then we'll be turning all of that into the 3 design alternatives that we will then be sharing with the community. So I think that's it for us, and we're ready to go to the discussion portion. We do have a few other slides we can bring up if questions come up, but I'm going to pause on the slide that we had made for the discussion items we thought were most important to hear from you on. So on the left side, we have the analysis topics, sort of the constraints that we're working with and how to mitigate those. And then on the right side, we have the community input themes that we are thinking all of these items would need to go in all of the 3 alternatives, and then we can make those alternative differentiated in terms of emphasis on different items in addition to this, but this is what we heard from the community that really needs to be folded into all of the concepts.
Thank you, Jan. I think we just, I think the chair takes it over from here, correct?
Okay, so the next step is clarification questions. Is that right? Okay, and thank you for the nice presentations, very informative with a lot of details. And now it's time for commissioners asking the clarification questions. So if you have any question, commissioners, please raise your hand and your name will be called one by one. First, Eric in the Scharf.
Yes, hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Linsk. I'm on the Bike Ped Commission. And I guess I think I would be interested in seeing your material, for the North Connection. It does seem it seems obvious one should make a North Connection, even though it may not be entirely trivial. It would be interesting to see what your analysis have shown as to the difficulties and possibilities there. Thank you.
Is it okay to share those slides now? Or how does the process work?
I think now is as good as any.
Okay. I have to go to the other view to find exact slides. We do have this bike connectivity map from the master plan, Park and Rec master plan, and I know this is also shown on the bike and ped plan, where it's desired to have a connection that goes all along the expressway and then connects up to Stevens Creek Boulevard up here. So that's what we
Are you sharing? I'm sorry. Are you sharing anything? I didn't see anything.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. So here's the Park and Rec master plan bike connectivity map. So this yellow square is enlarged right here. So here on the right side, you can see the desired link that goes from this existing solid line, stops here just past Sterling Barnhart, that we would want it to continue through our site and then cross Calvert Drive and up towards Stevens Creek Boulevard. And then that's an existing bike lane, as I'm sure you're aware, on Stevens Creek. So that would make more of a loop for people to continue along. What we've talked about is, as much as we want to make this connection, we do need a little help getting there because that's out of our scope and jurisdiction. And if we can make that connection in the short term, then we'll include the trail up to that point of our terminus of our site. If we can't, we'll at least make sure that the design incorporates a way to, in the future, make that connection. We won't put any obstructions in the way, and we would make a sort of like an interim solution so that we could go there in the future. And here's a couple of images of that too.
Just
So
to add to Jan's language there, you know, we're trying to stay within the confines of the property itself, because of the jurisdictional and time constraints. Because I know that there's a great desire to get things done sooner than later with this specific park. We aren't necessarily incorporating expansion of bike access from the north, essentially, because we're dealing with the county as well as state-related issues.
And this is kind of shows how tight that is right there. And what we don't want to do is create a dead end that ends here. So if we can't, in the short term, make this connection all the way up to a more of a loop, then we would not do this portion right now either, because we don't want to make a dead end situation. So we would end more at the end of the open space if we aren't able to make this go all the way to either Calvert with a loop there or all the way up to Stevens Creek. Here's one more image kind of on the ground. So you can see that there is a light there. There's no crosswalk, but there is a light here at this intersection. And then there's a, on this side of the freeway, there is a crosswalk there where you can go down along. It actually doesn't go along the expressway. It kind of goes behind the sound wall into this neighborhood on this side. And then on this side, on the left, is a sidewalk. It's not really a bike lane size. I think it's more like 6 feet, and there's some telephone poles and things. So it's not really bike ready, but it is a connection from here up to Stevens Creek Boulevard that is pedestrian safe.
Right. So, you know, my response is essentially at this point we'll accommodate a trail to the north to the extent that, you know, we take into consideration site safety, and then from there it's really a matter of having a little more push outside of the project to try to create that connection to the north. We have another question.
Okay. So the next is Ilango Ganga.
Yes, my question is also related to the north side connection for the bicycle and pedestrian path. I think you answered most of the questions. So I have some additional clarifications. The Stevens Creek Boulevard, access to Stevens Creek Boulevard seems to be really complex because there is an entry to 280 from Stevens Creek Boulevard, and there is also Lawrence Expressway crossing there because any bike path needs to have access to the south side of the Stevens Creek Boulevard as well as the north side of the Stevens Creek Boulevard if you want to have the both directions in there. And so my question is like that's one challenge there. And the second thing is, my question is, do we have enough space in the Calvert Drive where you can have a loop instead of going all the way straight, following the creek to Stevens Creek Boulevard? Instead, can we take a diversion on the Calvert Drive to Stevens Creek Boulevard? Would that be more, easier to do that? That way we can avoid the access to 280, or I'm not sure whether it's possible there.
Right. That's something that we've looked at a little bit. With this, again, we get into the jurisdictional issues associated with it. So while it may be a future possibility, it's not something we're not looking at anything strict outside of the existing site.
And also, is there any possibility for acquiring any private property that gives access to Johnson or Sterling? Right, because like I see that from the Sterling Barnhart Park all the way to the north, it's all private properties access. So, is there any possibility for acquiring any private properties that gives access on the north side?
We are not aware of any opportunity currently in that realm. It would be, I do think there'd be somewhat of a budget constraint for us because property there, I think, is fairly expensive. But we're definitely open to the possibility. That would need to be probably a council decision to take the next step, and additional funding would be required.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. And next, Commissioner Gopal Kumarpan.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions. One, I think it's kind of relying on Commissioner Ilango's question. So there is no access directly to this. I know I heard that parking, all of them. What is the path to come to this access to this park? Is it only through walking through the trails, or is there any other access points?
There is access for maintenance or emergency vehicles off of Lawrence Expressway, but it would be limited strictly to maintenance or emergency vehicles. So the access is from the south, from Bollinger. You can walk up the trail there, or from Sterling Barnhart, or crossing over from Mitty Way, crossing over Lawrence Expressway. So there's 3 access points to the north. There's no formal access point along Calvert Drive there. So those essentially would be the 3, I will say, public access points.
Okay, and thank you. And my second question is related to that. Do we have any other reference park? Because I know when we ask the citizens or residents about what are the amenities you want, they may not be aware of these constraints, or are they aware that they cannot? For example, basketball, any of them, when they come for a big, they need to carry equipment, they need to carry all of them. If there is no access and no park, do they know that these are the constraints they operate under before they provide a wish list? Did we give them those details?
So depending on the forum we were using, there was a big focus on informing the public regarding the site constraints because the site constraints are significant and multiple. And on the Engage Cupertino site, it discusses some of those constraints, but also in the pop-up meetings, the site tour, we were able to sort of demonstrate to folks what the constraints are. So I think for the most part, it's pretty well known. Also, a large percentage of the respondents were from this area, and they have seen the site. So I'm relatively confident at this point in time that they're aware of the constraints.
And this was just one of the graphics we shared with them that showed that.
Great. And last question. Do we have any other parks which we can refer to similar, either within the city limits or based on your experience and MIG experience? Is there any other reference points we have to take a look at it, specifically what kind of amenities it can hold? I know we cannot go extreme because of the access restrictions and the people cannot bring lot many things and to carry forward. Is there any other reference parks do we have?
I think this situation exists on a lot of trail corridors, maybe not with quite as much of a bigger open space like this.
Yeah, I am not aware of any other in the Cupertino area. It's a pretty unique circumstance, really.
Okay, and maybe the last question again, maybe I have one more. The 60 participants in person and then 13 virtual, 563 responses. Do we have one more round going there, or that's all the survey, or do we anticipate to go more surveys?
There's no plan currently to continue the survey or to do a second survey.
Okay, no, I'll stop for now. So Thanks, Chair. That's all my questions for now.
Thank you.
Oh, and thank you for the answer. And the next is Commissioner Jack Carter.
The clarification I'm looking for is, after the crossing the Mitty Way, is there no other outlet going north?
No.
Okay, it looks like all on the, and I'm mostly looking at the west side. So that's just a solid wall of private residency, so you can't, there's no gaps in there anywhere.
That is correct. You have the creek, and then you have the private properties on the other side of the creek.
Okay, so I'm assuming that there's going to be some sort of signage for bicyclists, letting them know that it does not go through at this time.
Sure, that's definitely something that can be included.
Okay, and a comment from the last person. If you look at McClellan Ranch, the path that goes from the beginning of McClellan Ranch over to Blackberry Farm is a miniature version of this, without an expressway, of course, but it gives you that riparian part. It gives you deeper areas and narrower areas. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you. So the next one will be Sashi Bigor.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions that I want to understand. Just looking at the surveys, it looks, just looking at the information, the community events had, about 60 people. The virtual event had 15, whereas the online survey, you got a lot of people, which is very nice. My question really was, what were the various methods that were used for advertising, either the community meetings, virtual community meeting, or the live meetings, or were they all just whatever happened on Engage Cupertino?
Right. So we had the Engage Cupertino set up with all the information. We also sent out a mailer, postcard to folks, informing them of the four events that had been occurring, as well as the survey. Obviously, on the Engage Cupertino site, we had access to the survey. And then at each, at the community meeting, we would announce the next set of meetings or pop-up events. So that was the process we used.
I have a couple more follow-up questions for you. Now,
Commissioner Gore, if I might just add to that, there was social media posts, as well as it was in the items of interest. There was, different avenues used for outreach. So if you want further information on that, I can definitely get that for you.
Sure. Excellent. So we've tried everything. We got what we got. Okay.
Yeah.
Follow up with regard to the, there's no road barrier in a certain, I'm just looking literally at the site, the understanding the site slide that's up here. Now, if we do put a road barrier, how will the emergency vehicles come in and out? Where will the emergency vehicles come in and out at this point?
So currently, if we do put a sound wall up of some sort, we would obviously need to keep some access for entry of maintenance as well as emergency vehicles. That primary entrance is located about 600 feet to the south of Calvert. It's just it's on the far northern side, about where you see on the lower graphic there, about where the red on the far right, where the red ends on the left-hand side, there is a driveway there essentially currently.
Can people see the cursor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's that one. Yeah. And then there's another one right down here. I think it's right here.
Right. Oh. Smaller access point.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. With regard to dog access, were people actually looking for a dog off-leash area? Or were they just asking to be able to bring their dogs on the trail?
it was a mix. A lot of people did want a dog off leash area. Some people, I think very few people wanted dogs off leash everywhere, but some people were proponents of having a specific dog off leash area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right now the existing trail is leash only. And so I'm sure at a minimum, they would expect it to be leash dogs. Okay.
Okay. And then my last question is, there was on your constraint slide, you had provided that the utility coordination with San Jose was considered a constraint. Is it just a constraint? Is it really a constraint, or is it just something we need to work with in a specific time frame? Is it a constraint from a time frame perspective, or how does it become a constraint? It's just work with San Jose instead of Cupertino.
I think it's just a complication, but it's not undoable. It's just easier to work with the city that you're located in than not. But because of the creek barrier, it makes sense to work with San Jose.
Okay, that's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you. So next is Bike and Ped Commissioner Eric Lindskog again.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. So just to follow up on my questions regarding the North Connection. So if you take a look at the Cupertino High School attendance boundary, you'll find that there's a large, portion of it that's on the north and east side of the kind of the intersection of 280 and Lawrence Expressway. So it looks on the map that these kids have a difficult way to get by walking or biking, to Cupertino High. But if you would if you would make the North Connection, it would be a lot easier. And it looks to me that, I don't know, you were describing it differently, but it looks to me that you can just continue straight. You just, the surface crossing over, what is it, a culvert drive. Surface crossing there is already a signal, so I think it wouldn't be too difficult. And then it looks to me, so when I took part in the community cleanup of the park a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to walk all the way up to Calvert Drive, or as far as the access goes there anyway. Yes, it does get narrow. It's like a choke point at some point where there's some utility installed along Lawrence Expressway. It mainly looks like it gets narrow because there's a fence there, but once you build the trail, I don't know why you need the fence, because now it's public access on both sides. So maybe the fence there can go, and you can actually have a bit more access. And then it looked to me that you can just continue under 280 up to Stevens Creek, although I wasn't able to walk that, so I'm not entirely sure. But if one can do that somehow, you would most likely be able to provide a biking path for a large number of students. And I would think this is the type of project that, for example, you get funding via some external organization, maybe overseen by the VTA. So that could maybe bring down the cost for the project significantly. So that would be my recommendation, to explore that, seriously. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. And I agree, having that access from the north is an important element, sort of creating good circulation through the park. But I also believe that project is sort of above and beyond the scope of what we're looking at currently. And it's certainly something I think the city should explore in the future as connectivity for biking and for pedestrian.
I just would like to interrupt for a quick second and remind people that we're just still on clarifying questions, and then we'll go to comments from the public before we get input and feedback. Thank you.
Okay, the next commissioner, Gerhard Eschelbeck.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this with us tonight. obviously a lot of things have been said already. I fully support the north connectivity, of course, as well. I think it would be nice to have it. But my question was two questions. One is, I've been on site and saw the site. I feel that the Sterling Barnard Bridge is very narrow for the kind of traffic we are hoping to get there. If there, especially if there's no north connectivity as well. So wondering if there is any possibility to widen that bridge to make it a little bit more easier to pass. And then second question is, I also saw all those big berms or piles of dirt, and I was wondering, I couldn't see it clearly from the presentation today, nor from the materials that were attached, if there's a plan to remove that, which I certainly would hope that is the case. But I just wanted to clarify that if that is in fact the case, that those piles of dirt will be eliminated.
Yes, you can see in this picture, there's like one of the piles right there. And then
yes, exactly. Those are the ones I was talking about, and they really take away the view to the creek as well, and to the kind of. I think it makes it a little bit more rough. So I think if there's any opportunity to remove those piles of dirt, that would be awesome.
Definitely the ones in the middle with no trees are definitely removed. And then see the berm in the back. Some places where there's major mature trees with tree roots might need to stay in portions, but a lot of it that's not with mature tree roots could be removed. So it's sort of a case-by-case basis on this berm next to the creek right here where my cursor is. But the big soil piles for sure can be removed.
Yeah, I would anticipate removing definitely the ones that stick out in the property, and then the berms I think we'll remove on an as-needed basis. And also some of the site, even though the soil may just be reused on site, especially if we have to do any excavation to remove asphalt, the existing asphalt. So, but we'll definitely see removal of those primary berms. In regards to the widening of the bridge, I haven't, it's been a little while since I've walked across the bridge. I'm trying to figure out whether it's a 6-foot or an 8-foot bridge. We have not looked at that as an alternative. That's probably a little bit of a mixed bag in that, the wider you make things, the faster people want to go across them. And because you're kind of up against Sterling Barnhart, as well as teeing into the existing trail, I think it's something we'd want to consider carefully if we did look at widening the bridge. The other constraint is obviously the cost of that bridge is considerable.
Yeah. I understand. If there's a north axis, I wouldn't be worried about too much, but I think considering that there is no north axis planned at this point, I certainly would think this would be something worth to look into. But thank you for the answers.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next is Planning Commissioner Stephen Scharf.
Hi, thank you, Minna. So I wanted to answer one of the questions. When I was on the city council and we voted to spend the money to acquire this land, we definitely did say that we wanted to consider spending some of our park funding to purchase properties along Sterling as they came up for sale, and perhaps construct pedestrian bridges into the park to have another access point. I've noticed several houses have been sold there in the past, not too distant past, and nothing was done there. And there is precedent for this. We did buy a house over in Monte Vista by the entrance to Blackberry Farm, and that was done to improve pedestrian and bicycle access into Blackberry Farm. So the money is there if we choose to spend it like that, and that would give another access point into the park. The other issue about the north access, I don't know if am I able to share my screen here or not? Who gives me permission to do a screen share? Let's see, maybe oh, here we go. So if you look to the right in John Mize Park across Lawrence Expressway, VTA does have
couldn't see anything.
Oh, you can't see it?
It said started screen sharing, but it's still black. Maybe another screen. Maybe
Can you hear? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Oh yeah, we got it.
Towards the. Do you see it or not?
So in the middle, that's.
You have another screen blocking.
Yeah.
Park, which is across Lawrence Expressway. VTA does have plans for a bike ped.
So Steve, we can't see that clearly. There's a big gray thing across.
Yeah.
You have one screen.
We can see your map, but the middle part was blocked by a black square.
Connectivity issues due to his screen share. So if we could move on and then come back to him when he reconnects, that'd be great.
Okay. So yeah, next is Commissioner Ray Wang. You can ask your question.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I wanted to compliment everybody here for a pretty good job in terms of getting community input as well as the process here. And I thought that was pretty good here. Some things we can learn in some of our other commissions. But I really wanted to also agree with Chair Scharf. It'd be nice to have some kind of access point. I think he's trying to talk about the VTA access point. Hopefully he can get back in to talk about that. And I also just wanted to add just some safety concerns. I'm not sure what's going to be done to patrol that area, given the high amount of homeless encampments that are there. And I think that's just a concern. I know you guys are kind of looking at it in the periphery, but that's something that might need some funding or something at least to keep that area safe for some of the folks that are there. And then I don't know what the hours are for that area is going to be in terms of the park, if you have park hours that have been determined. So
I don't believe any park hours have been determined, and we agree, site safety is going to be elemental to a successful project and a successful park. Many of those decisions are made on the operational level, depending on activities. One of my primary concerns is that northern access point. We don't want to pinch people into a very narrow space where they feel unsafe and then come across a dead end. And so we definitely, will take that into consideration as well as sort of the berms that are on site, being able to clear out what we're able to, what permitting allows us to do. So you have visibility as much as possible into the site, as well as clearing brush in and around the creek, I think will be very important to that process.
yeah, thank you. That northern point at at Calvert and Lawrence is very dangerous. You might not even have a northern access point that far up. It might just be something someone accesses from somewhere else. But yeah, the safety piece is a piece that I keep hearing from folks. So thank you very much.
Okay, so let's go back to Stephen.
Oh, sorry, my Zoom crashed. All I was pointing out was that VTA does have plans for an overcrossing to the north of 280, and specifically to help Cupertino High School students who live over there get to school. So if we could build a protected bike lane along Mitty over to the park, if that overcrossing ever gets built, it's been planned for decades. That would be a northern access point as well. That is kind of brings you into a better place than Stevens Creek and Calvert. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So the next will be Ilango Ganga.
If I have a follow-up question, you're able to hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this is on there is a crossing right now across Lawrence Expressway to Mitty Way. I think Commissioner Scharf touched upon that point. And so I would like to know, if you have plans or for a bicycle and pedestrian path going all the way up to Moore Park. So that way, students coming from the east side of of Lawrence can cross instead of following and then using the Bollinger road, right? They could, use the Mitty Way, and then come all the way and cross the park to the Barnhart, and then go to Cupertino High School. So that's one possibility. Is maybe you might wanted to touch upon what plans are being made for providing an access point here. That still doesn't solve the north access point problem. It is right in the middle, but I would like to hear as to what plans are there for the Mitty Way.
So other than ensuring that that crosswalk continues to function as a passageway into the park, we haven't given consideration to anything from Lawrence Expressway to the east. That's actually still San Jose property. I'm not familiar specifically with the site area you're speaking to. But again, the one thing that occurs to me in relation to that crossing at Mitty Way at Lawrence Expressway is just to investigate whether we can get, whether it's the county or Department of Transportation, to help us control that light signal a little bit more so that folks don't have to wait an extended period of time to cross the Lawrence Expressway to get to or from the park. I think that would be beneficial. And beyond that, we haven't investigated anything outside of the property.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have two clarification questions. So one is the other commissioner already asked about the parking. So what I heard is on our survey, and it's not mentioned there won't be parking when the park is built. But in the community meeting, it's mentioned. So the community members should learn it from the community outreach work. But from what I heard, some community members, they thought maybe after the city built the park, maybe they can find some place, figure out to get some parking place. So it seems some of them still have such hope. So if there won't be any parking, is it possible to put the information on some place, maybe on city website of Lawrence-Mitty Park, make it more obvious, so we just can inform community members about it? And because I remember maybe 1 or 2 years ago in a park commission meeting, some community members, they still think the park entrance is on Lawrence, and they said because the traffic is so fast, how to get in the parking, but it turned out they misunderstood the situation. So is it possible to make the information more,
Yes, absolutely. And I do know we mentioned the site constraints for access, but it's sort of intermixed with other site constraints on the Engage Cupertino site. So it's certainly something we can alter on the Engage Cupertino website to make it explicit the parking won't be possible on the site.
And we can also make sure that we make that clear in the 3 alternatives that are shared as well.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is about the lighting on the trail. So in the past, some community members complained there's no lighting by the trail. So at night, only the Barnhart Park has lighting. But if they riding back from the park to their community along the trail, that's completely dark. But at that time, they were told that the maintenance work is by county. I just want to make sure now our city can put some lighting there. It's not by county anymore.
Right. And this is something I think there's a little bit of tension around as far as community involvement goes, because some people would like to see lighting on the trail and other people believe because it's sort of, they want to maintain that sort of wildlife corridor aspects because of its proximity to the creek. Many people are saying they don't want lighting. So it is, there's definitely a little bit of dichotomy there in relation to opinion. It is something we'll probably seriously look at one way or the other. And that may be something that we need to get your input during this time on and what your thoughts are.
Okay, thank you. And looks like nobody else raised your hand. Okay, we finished the clarification question session, and the next part is community inputs. So community members, if you have any question on this agenda item, please raise your hand, and you have 3 minutes to talk. I see the first one raised hands. Jenny, you can start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, this is Jennifer Griffin, and you guys have done an amazing job with this presentation, and I've been very, very impressed with all of the outreach to the public and about. I actually went on site when they had the tour of the area, and it was just mind-boggling. There are some totally amazing trees in that creek. I mean, we're looking at oaks that are 200 to 300 years old. They are virtually untouched. I mean, I was absolutely stupefied to see that down there. That it is just, you just don't find things like that. And I'm really, really impressed with how professional everything has been done to try to use this site for for the park depleted east side of Cupertino. I kind of look at this as a riparian, a passive corridor for people to enjoy the area, the creek, the nature, lots of benches. Of course, we have it. This is the fifth section, the reach of the bike Saratoga Creek Trail. I think this is the 5th reach or 6th reach. That term's been going around for 10 years. And also, you have a great, wonderful potential to have, like, maybe areas where you could have places where people could do gym type things, you know, you could exercise, etc. So I'm going to say right now, if people weren't aware, we have coyotes in that area. We have coyotes in Rancho Rinconada. We've lost a lot of cats, small dogs. I don't want to scare anyone, but I think it's good to remember that if people, you know, people can bring dogs in, there, you know, dogs all over the area. I just think it's better that dogs stay on leash, because you will have coyotes going and taking small dogs that are not with their owners. I hate to say that has happened at Rancho San Antonio, etc. But I think that the whole area has a tremendous potential to be a wonderful pastoral site. I'm just going to say, anything that you put up as a sound wall along Lawrence will have graffiti go on it. So keep that in mind. The safety issue back in there, you want to make sure that people feel safe, not from being hit by a car in Lawrence, just things happen in that area. There's a lot of firecrackers, fires have started back there. And I mean, I've lived down there since 1985, and there's all sorts of stuff. So probably need to have some sort of a patrol down there. But I'm just so excited about this. If people weren't aware, this was owned by the Graves family since 1865. And there it was cattle ranch, and their family home is at Mitzi and Saratoga Avenue. We're trying to save that with a PAC, Preservation Action Group in San Jose.
15 seconds.
Anyway, thank you so much. You guys are doing a fantastic job, and this is going to be a tremendous asset to the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing your opinions. And the next is Connie Cunningham. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, good evening, Chair. Thank you for this time. My name is Connie Cunningham. I'm a 34-year resident of Cupertino. I'm also an Audubon member and an advocate for birds, wildlife, and native plants. I want to also thank you for this excellent report and presentation about the new Lawrence-Mitty Park. Also, your thoughtful and knowledgeable responses to questions. This is an exciting topic, a new park in Cupertino. I have walked the length of the planned park from Bollinger Road to Lawrence and Mitty at the pedestrian crossing. My friends who live near this park are also excited about walking this trail. I noted the yellow warbler discussed in the report. Since I'm a bird lover, I'm particularly interested to read about bird life there. The several plans referenced in the written report, the general plan, the bike ped plan, the Parks and Rec plan, and the CAP plan all speak to balancing the needs of nature and the needs of the community. It was really heartening to read about the community input supporting local wildlife habitat and use of parks that promote education about nature and play that allows time for interaction with nature. One addition to your report about the CAP plan is the new CAP 2.0 plan that is coming in, is that the addition of the tree canopy, in this whole city as an important climate change strategy. This particular park is large enough to accommodate many California native trees, plants, and grasses. It already has several of these trees, so any of those new type of plants will support the existing natural growth. So I heartily endorse that. Excuse me. I urge the designers to put the bike trail as far from the creek as possible at any time to keep the faster traffic away from the quieter area of the creek. The bikes will still be in the vicinity of the creek and can enjoy it a little further away than those who are walking. I urge the planners to take more soil samples throughout the area, rather than just the portions of the park along the street. This was a construction yard where many things have been discarded over the years. It will be important to ensure that toxic waste or lead is not in that soil, nor in the berms, nor the piles of debris, nor in the soil beneath the impervious surface of the previously developed area. And I think you do definitely need to eliminate artificial lighting. Artificial lighting disturbs the natural biological rhythms of birds, insects, animals, and plants. Many studies show that light pollution also impacts humans, leading to mood changes, difficulty with sleeping, as well as cancer. It disrupts the wildlife passages through there. Okay, this park is a half a mile in length. Since it's planned to be a connector, it's important to note that besides the design elements and signage to slow bicycles that are going through that area.
10 seconds left.
Okay, so bulb outs for people to approach the creek, but keep some locations not admissible by people. Too much compacted earth and foot traffic disturbs natural ability of trees. Okay, that's about it. Thank you so much for your time to listen to me about this exciting new park, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Connie, for sharing your thoughts. And the next speaker is Bestie Megas. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, thank you. Betsy Megas. I am a Santa Clara resident, and I do serve on the VTA Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee with Eric. Glad to see this project. Expressways and freeways are barriers to walking and biking. I am looking forward to access to the north for that reason, and also because if I use this trail, I will be coming from the north. I suggest that access is also a safety feature, just in terms of not isolating this park as much as it already is. One of the commissioners earlier, I think, asked about equivalent parks. It's not quite the same situation, but an example of a park kind of tucked in between a creek and a trail and an expressway is Eddie Souza Park in Santa Clara at San Tomas and Monroe. With respect to what the previous speaker was saying, I suggest that that's also a good example, Eddie Souza Park, that you look at doing a soft separation between the trail and the park uses. That's could be a little bit of a grade where the trail is above or below the park. It could be sort of a waist high or lower rail fence or some shrubbery, stuff like that. Visibility is good, but have a little bit of division between it so that that the interaction between the trail and the park uses is sort of concentrated at predictable spots where you can see if there might be a little kid, running across the trail. Is the bicycle through traffic doesn't always mix terribly well with that. The other place I would suggest, and I know that this may be a future thing, but attention to visibility if there is a north entrance near the intersection at Calvert. Some of the Saratoga Creek Trail intersections, you kind of pop out of the sound wall and you're practically on the expressway. and a little bit of to back that off just a little bit, and have, maybe 40 feet of no sound wall, or something lower where you can see what you're getting into when you go through that opening. Let's see. I'm definitely in favor of trees and shade, including on the trail corridor itself. That strip of asphalt can get pretty hot.
15 seconds left.
Thank you. And I was wondering if there will be access to recycled water for irrigation on this site. And I believe that is it. Thank you. Oh, wayfinding for MIDI and connecting routes. Sorry.
And thank you. And the next speaker is Lisa Warren. Hi, Lisa, you have 3 minutes to talk.
The unmute was a little slow. Okay, so some of you have heard me say this before, but I think it's super.
Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry.
I'm back, I think. Am I back?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Minna, you muted me. I believe that a name change for this facility is imperative and should happen sooner rather than later. And I believe strongly that once the name is changed from sounding very institutional and very freeway/San Jose and not Cupertino, you will get better feedback from people. And if you were to, now in the summer months when more people are doing activities at the Rancho Pool, it's a great place to post information. But if you say something about, a new park in Rancho or in Rancho Rinconada, those people are more likely, and they come from everywhere, are more likely to pay attention other than Lawrence-Mitty, because Lawrence is as we know, expressway. Mitty is a San Jose street. The name does not make sense. It's not. So anyway, I've already chimed in about that other places, but please do that soon so we can start referring it to it. And people need to know that Calvert is actually a one-way extended freeway entrance. It's not just a neighborhood street or a busy neighborhood street. It is one way, which further complicates these problems that staff and consultants are trying to convey. It is very tricky, even if you get there. And then you can't basically cross that. Then you're stuck on Lawrence and can't get across to the freeway 280 exit that you need to get off of to get to Stevens Creek. It's a major quagmire, and it's going to take a lot of energy, and it needs to be done, but as staff keeps presenting, as a side issue. I'm not opposed to it, other than I think there's probably a safer way to try to get access into the same area, but not across Calvert and trying to get to Stevens Creek. And if Commissioner Scharf's idea is helpful, I think those questions need to be asked of the people that are considering a different cross. Because I'm pretty confident that Safe Routes to School would not approve of this a way to get to school. It's not safe. Berms, I really, and I'm going to miss a bunch of my stuff because I'm running out of time already, but berms, I heard it say that they'll be removed as needed, and I would hope that you really meant would be kept as needed. I would like to see, and I know a bunch of people would like to see most of the berms, but understanding that the tree roots need to be considered and respected. I'm hoping there's more opening than less. I agree with the idea of doing more soils testing, but I don't know exactly what was tested. And I should note that there's already a dog park on the other side of Lawrence, on another linear park at the back of where Orchard Supply used to be, which will now be a Costco, at that end of that long park.
Thanks, Lisa. Sorry, you're out of time.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more community members want to talk about this agenda item? If no more, we will start the discussion among commissioners. Okay, commissioners, if you have anything you want to say, please raise your hand. I will call your name one by one. I didn't see. Okay. Gopal Kumarapan, you are the first.
Thank you, Chair. So I think based on hearing from many other commissioners, I learned all of those, like the safety concerns and other areas. So when do we plan to, I know we are going on a design consideration. I think that's the next phase, I believe. But some of the things we haven't heard, like for example, the lighting and the safety and all parts, which are very critical, which I haven't even thought about it earlier. That's a good part of learning from our colleagues here. Are you planning to use these data again, come back to address those, or directly jumping into the design? Because the design means, and we are already making up our mind to put few things and come back with the design consideration. So I'm trying to see what the process here. All these are very valid inputs, and how are we going to digest the input and to put it back into your design process as data points before we do it? Is there any update we will get it? I don't know whether we'll have another meeting like this, but because those are very critical in my opinion, and I just want to know what the process.
I can maybe speak to that, unless Lisa, you want to go first. I saw you turn your microphone off.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to say that, we've taken these into consideration throughout. Site safety has been, from day one, a big concern. If you've spent any time on the site, you're aware of what the issues might be. Noise on the site is also a very big concern. Site access is a big concern. So these are all constraints that, as we move through these design alternatives, will be taken into consideration. Of course, there will be differing opinions about, because you have these natural tensions between site safety, but a noise barrier. Noise barriers don't lend themselves to great site safety because of visibility issues. And that's why we wanted to develop these three alternatives to kind of take those into consideration and bring it back to the community. And once those three alternatives are developed, we will be going back out to the community to hear their concerns about those specific three alternatives.
So the only thing that I would add to that is, yes, you will get another chance to review this information. And again, I would just state, this is kind of the preliminary. Instead of coming up with three concepts to design, we wanted your input first. And so we will try to address all the different elements and the three options. And then moving forward, once you have the three options, you can say in option A, we really like the sound wall, and option B, we really like, the pathway or the tree canopy. So you kind of get to pull until you come up with one design. And so that's kind of the process in case you needed further clarification on that. So we'll come back to you again.
Awesome. No, that's all the comment I had. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And the next is Eric Lindaskog.
Yes, hi again. So if exploring, like a north connection outside the park area was not part of, the request to be studied here, shouldn't we study that first before we decide what we're going to build? Because that's kind of critical. You'd like to have a way through the park so it doesn't become a dead-end park, right? So I think my recommendation would be open up that discussion, that topic, study that, figure out how I can solve that problem, and then go ahead with the design. Thank you.
Right, and I can appreciate the need for that, again, for that northern access. I don't necessarily believe that the having the northern access would impact much the type of design that goes into it, because it's, whatever elements go into the park, essentially there'll still be bike and pedestrian access, but no vehicle access. So a lot of the amenities I think would remain the same. It would just open the possibility of greater traffic, bike and pedestrian traffic through the area. So that's sort of my thinking on this. And again, because I think the council is most interested in trying to achieve something on this at the park site specifically, then the trail we build on the existing site will be sort of that incremental next step to whatever projects lead to access on the north.
Okay.
So I think I maybe missed to have my hand up. Isn't it possible that if you, from the very beginning, make a north access, you have a bike connection that connects up to Stevens Creek Boulevard, that you can use that to argue for funding?
I'm not certain of what type of funding is available as far as grant funding or state funding associated with bike and pedestrian access.
So I'd like to just jump in here real quick. Eric, you bring up all valid points, and I think that, the feedback of the group is duly noted. We'll certainly incorporate that into, our thoughts moving forward. I would just point out that there's multiple jurisdictions involved, which always creates more hurdles and challenges. And so we don't want to stop this project in the time we're waiting to try and organize the future of that access point. But it definitely has been on the city's radar for many moons and will continue to be, and we will make sure to continue to try and address it as best we can with this project. So really appreciate the feedback and input. We know it's super important.
I would add just one thing as well, is sometimes in our projects that we've done in trail projects that it even becomes more stronger position when you link another portion to what's already established. So, when it becomes the next point, it really brings more emphasis to that project that you're looking for. And as you said, funding can become more available because it's a super link. It's kind of like you just demonstrate that it really should continue to go on. So it's just another way of looking at it.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for all the information. And the next is Bikram. Yeah, it's your turn to ask a question.
Hi, thank you everybody for the presentation, and it was really informative. We've been hearing about this for a long time, so it's good to see the ideas. And in general, East Side has shortage of parts, so it'd be good to put this together. I wanted to step back a bit and ask a question which is probably more appropriate for the city attorney. I heard a bunch of things, including coyotes and traffic and so on. As the city goes ahead with developing the property, what are the guidelines we have or the processes we follow so or whatever we create is safe and doesn't expose the city to liabilities? So it's a much broader question, but I wanted to bring that in because I heard a whole bunch of things which could be safety related. Thank you.
That is a question I might ask more of Joanne, because I'm sure as the Parks Director, she has to deal with site safety consistently and liabilities associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, getting the community input and feedback on the different elements associated to the design is the most important here. And again, this is a unique site, but I think that once the site is activated, that those issues that I think people are worried about will become less prevalent. So, at any park, we, obviously have challenges when, it's nighttime or, it's after hours and the park is closed. But, we work closely with the sheriff and code enforcement for those purposes, and we will continue to do so. And so I would say it's actually not so much of a problem in Cupertino. And our parks have been utilized very well over the pandemic, actually. I would say that we would just continue our working relationships with those departments to ensure those things are being addressed.
Okay, next is the Commissioner Ilango Ganga can ask a question.
Thank you. So I have a set of inputs or feedback, I would say, regarding the park, right? So first one is, I think Commissioner Gerhard Eschelberg also raised this point. So I would like to say that we should consider widening the bicycle and pedestrian access path and the bridge from Barnhart Avenue to the park. That's my number one. The second thing is consider extending the bicycle and pedestrian access across Lawrence Expressway through Mitty Way, or connecting all the way to Moore Park Avenue and Barnhart Avenue. We have already a bicycle boulevard that extends up to that point. So that will be providing a good access point for the students on the east side of Lawrence Expressway to reach the Cupertino High School, for example. And of course, this requires, working with the city of the San Jose in order to extend that path through, Mitty Way. So that's my second point. The third one is extend the sound wall from the south side to the north side of the park across, alongside the Lawrence Expressway. That is to provide noise mitigation as well as for protecting the park, from the expressway. The next one, I think many of the commissioners have provided this input, and I would again reiterate the point about the north side access to the park from Stevens Creek Boulevard. I'm not saying that we have a solution right now, but I would really request the team to come back with a solution, and then we can look at it at a later point when we have a solution for north side access. The other point, which is again related to this, is actively look for opportunities to acquire private properties, look for sales on Sterling, so that we can provide additional access points to the park north of the Sterling Barnhart Park. So that's something that we need to be looking at it. I know that Commissioner Scharf made this point, and I think the city should actively look at this, even though we don't have earmark funding for that, but there is the opportunity for this with existing funding. The next thing is on the park, it should be open from sunrise to sunset so that we don't have to deal with the lights for environmental reasons. I think in general, the water district has been discouraging, having lights alongside the creek side, so that, I think we should continue the same and not disturb the wildlife from sunset to, sunrise. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next is Sanjeev Kapil.
Yeah, hi. I have a very small question, 3 of them. One is that this park is covered on 2 sides, I-280 and Lawrence Expressway. Has anybody or any of these investigations in this park tried to ascertain the air quality over there? Because these highways are heavily trafficked, and large vehicle traffic goes over there. And this is kind of a park which is next to the highway, so it will be good to know that what kind of air quality we will have. Probably it will be part of the CEQA investigation. Second piece I want to know, in some of the properties I know in Cupertino, we came to know the soil quality very late, although the property like Walco was there in picture for a very long time, but later on, much later, like years later, we figured out that it had contamination in the soil and it's kind of unusable. So I presume that similar investigation or quality of the soil at this place would be made available to the people to look at it. And the third, community outreach, I just want to know that have you actually categorized the age group of the people who have given you the feedback? because this park is not to say that it is only for certain segment of the population, but it is very important to know the kind of age group who has given you the feedback related to it, because the usage pattern and the feedback pattern on the may not match. Because the usage might be and teenagers using more, or maybe the set of people who are younger and the people who are giving you feedback a set of different age groups. So it is kind of makes sense to basically figure out the demographic nature of the feedback you are receiving. And related to that is that some visitation statistics or data you have from for this particular park anticipated in future. So that will actually make many of the budget constraints and things like that much more easier for to deal with. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. So Myrna, can you remind me whether we collected age, the demographic on age on this?
Yeah, we did. We asked age as well as if there were children in the household. So we have that data in the report, and you can reference that as well.
Great, thank you. And I will say that in all of our public events, you know, we actively tried to pull children into the questioning. We would reach out specifically to younger populations because we realize many times it's the older population that tend to be very active on these projects. So that hopefully that answers your first question. In regards to the soils and the suggestion for more investigation, I agree with you. I think that knowing what we know now, we will need to do a little more site investigation on the soils before we get too far down the road. I don't know that it will immediately impact the alternatives. It will potentially impact the budget if we, depending on how we choose to handle the soils on site. And then in relation to the air quality, and Mike can correct me, but I don't believe there was any air quality investigation completed on this.
No, that's correct. As of now, we haven't. When we get to the CEQA phase of the project, we will include an analysis of existing air quality, potential impacts to air quality, greenhouse gas analysis, emissions. That'll all be part of the CEQA review for the project.
And Mike, do you have anything to add in regards to the soil and additional investigation and inventory?
Yeah, regarding the soils, you know, at this point, there have been 2 phase 1 environmental site assessments, 2 phase 2 assessments done. So we have a pretty good idea of what types of contamination is out there. What we don't know is whether we want, you know, which of the 3 options we want to take, whether we want to leave it in place or cover it or remove it from the site. So I think depending on which way the city wants to go with that, that will decide how much more analysis we'll need to do on the contamination. Because we will, if you want to excavate and off-haul that material, we need to know the boundaries, the extent of the contamination, so we can figure out how much to haul off and those kinds of things. So that would require some further investigation if we pick that option.
Do you think it's a good time to also explain just the general whereabouts of it along the expressway and the fact that it's some historical car use, not ongoing?
Yeah, that's a good point. What we know from the reports is that the lead contamination occurs mostly along the edge of the east edge of the project site, adjacent to the expressway. And the reason for that is it's caused from automobile exhaust with some atmospheric deposition as well. So what we've seen in the samples is that the highest concentrations are in that area. But there are other locations to the south as well that do have high concentrations too. So again, you know, more testing, more sampling would give us a more complete picture of the full extent of it. But safe to say that most contaminated areas are closer to the expressway.
And it's from the when gasoline all had lead in it, right?
Right. So going forward, since we haven't had lead in gasoline for quite a while now, it's not likely that those kinds of accumulations will happen in the future. But the fact is, it is there now. It's a legacy contaminant, and it's there. So we need to decide what to do with it.
Thank you, Mike. And Jan.
Also, yeah, just wanted to add that on page 23 of attachment B for the outreach report, that indicates the age range for the participation.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. And the next is Eric Linda Scharf.
Sorry, I just forgot to put down my hand. No more comment. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So it's Kara Stanek. It's your turn.
Hello, thank you, Chair Shu. I just want to support some of the other commissioners' comments with respect to the completion of the trail to the north. I think we don't want to have a bridge to nowhere where we're spending a lot of money and for a trail. I think the fact that the city has committed to this project is a very strong commitment that could be put forward even before it's completed, to go forward and investigate what other options would be available from the other jurisdictions and to get their buy-in. So as our director said, it's been on the council's view for many moons. I think it makes sense to highlight it sooner rather than later, because we know it will still take a long time with all the various jurisdictions to get traction on this. And so I think it's really important to highlight to the council how important the level of interest from all three of these commissions for that north connection. So I hope, I'm not saying this just to say what everybody else said, but just to show the level of support for that option. The sound wall is absolutely a high priority, because if you've been out there, you know how loud it is. And to Commissioner Shu's point about maybe some of the people giving input didn't understand, even though the education was there, about the fact that this is allowed, could be allowed property. You know, some of the comments or requests for things like a performance space simply don't make sense out there. And so I think we should go through and put some qualitative judgments on some of the suggestions, like performance space. That unfortunately, you know, we need a performance space in Cupertino. This is not the place for it. So I even have concern about having too much picnic areas, because there is no car access. The only people who could come there to picnic is if you're coming on bike or by foot, and it will still be loud. And so let's consider, will people want to come here to picnic versus go to one of our other parks? So what are the things that we can put here that that make sense with where it is? With respect to dog access, I think dogs on leash should be something that is absolutely allowed there. Dogs are allowed throughout our city, except in the nature preserve. And there should be no security issue with respect to dogs on leash at all. And, you know, if there is an interest in dogs off leash, I think that should be maybe a later review that could be studied separately. But dogs on leash, I think, should be something that shouldn't even be a question, but we should make sure that that is available. Those are all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. So yeah, I also have some comments on this. And first is about the in the presentation, we talked about trees. I just want to share some information. So more than 10 years ago, the Saratoga Creek, they had water all year. So even in the summertime, there's a lot of water there in the creek. But from about 8 years ago, because of the drought, so from spring to fall, there was completely no water. And after 3 or 4 years, some trees around the creek, they started to die because their root was very shallow, and without the running water in the creek, they just started to die. So I'm wondering if our city is thinking about plant more trees. Did you consider the condition of the creek? Is this a factor you already considered?
I would say yes. We've had a tree inventory completed on the site to assess the condition of all the trees along the corridor there. And definitely landscaping, including trees, would be part of this project, and the consideration of current sort of drought conditions would be part of that decision. And Jan, maybe you've got something to add there.
Okay, thanks. And I have another comments on the survey result. I saw the restroom is put in a high priority. I just want to explain why it's like this. I think it's because more than half of the people filled the survey, they come from the east side. And the Barnhart Park, there was no restroom and it's inconvenient. So that's why people just put it high priority. But I'm thinking if we have the survey in some other area of Cupertino or maybe some other place, maybe people just think every park has restrooms, then they don't need to worry about it. Then they won't put it as so high priority. So maybe if this is a big park, we are definitely going to build a restroom. Maybe we can remove this part and look at the next one residents said they hope to see at this park. And so after the restroom, I think the next one is lighting. So I'm not clear about, so if we want the park to open after sunset, I'm pretty sure we need some lighting. And because in recent years, there were coyote along the Saratoga Creek. So without lighting, there may be some safety issue. But I also heard about to keep the natural trail and to protect the animals and the birds, maybe we don't need the light. So I want to know if staff member already have some study on this issue, why you put the lighting on the survey, and so many people said they hope to see that in the park.
So I think we wanted to ensure that that the public had the opportunity to look at the possibilities. We've definitely heard varying opinions on the lighting for the park. The consensus generally are the folks that are more the naturalists are less interested in lighting. And because one of the major themes that's come through on this on the survey that's been completed is sort of a natural habitat that sort of edges lighting out in a way. But it's definitely something we'll continue to consider. It's just a matter of how compatible it is with the other design elements within the park, and what problems it solves and what problems it creates.
Okay, thank you. I don't have further thoughts to share. So there anyone have more?
So if I might, I don't see any other hands raised either. And I just wanted to say to, the team involved, Lisa and MIG, as well as your coordination, Chair Hsu, for this item. We really appreciate everybody's participation and feedback. And we'll definitely incorporate this information prior to it going to City Council. And so if no one has anything else, I think we can close out the meeting, Chair Hsu.
Okay. Yeah, for this agenda item, we don't need to vote for anything. So thank you everyone for attending this meeting, and thanks all the staff members you prepared so many great presentations, and you did a lot of hard work before this meeting to make it happen. And thanks for answering so many questions. And I also want to thank the community members join our meeting and share your opinion. That's very helpful. Okay, now it's 8:40. Yeah, I call this joint commission meeting to end. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.